brightly beams our Father's mercy from his lighthouse evermore. But to us he gives the keeping of the lights along the shore. Let the lower line...
People look up to me. People have been looking up at me from every angle for years and years. And even today, when some question if I'm necessary at all, people still look up. Am I necessary? Am I necessary? Well, I'm going to tell you my story, and you can decide. I am the light. I am the South Haven light. I stand at the end of the South Haven pier. I am a red rock of Gibraltar, steady as she goes, with over 100 years of history behind me. I am one of over 400 lights on the Great Lakes, 124 in Michigan, one of only 4 with a catwalk. I am not the oldest, I am not the youngest, I am not the brightest, I am not the tallest. But to folks who live and visit around here, I am definitely the coolest. I am here for you in the heaviest of seas, pounded and pummeled by the anger that can be Lake Michigan. I am here in the dead of winter, iced head to toe, but always standing tall. I have been a host to you and your friends from near and far. I am alone most of the time, standing a thankless vigil bypassed by technology, but today I play another role. And I think when you hear my story, you will agree that it's an important one. I am your touchstone to history. See, I started out looking like this nearly a century and a half ago, when the good Reverend Ketchum, a Methodist minister here in town, painted this picture of me. About the only thing that's left that you'll recognize is the very top part, the lantern room. Everything else has been replaced, including the all-wood fuel storage room under the lantern room. I went through about 80 gallons of whale oil and later kerosene in a year. I was constructed from the same set of plans as the lights in St. Joe, Kenosha, and Grand Haven. The first pier here was built in 1861 and was 225 feet long. Now, when I came along, they lengthened it to 300 feet. Piers continued to stretch out into the lake as boats got bigger and traffic increased. I made several trips out into the river as piers were lengthened, then floated back to cap off the end of the new, longer structure. And remember, every time the South Pier was lengthened, the North Pier had to be lengthened too. By 1902, they were selling advertising space on the pier to Abel's Drug Store and other local merchants. What price commerce, I guess, but more importantly, that's the year I got a new Fresnel lens. Coming from France, this prism-based lens bent light from vertical to horizontal and significantly increased my candle power. By 1902, that marked the beginning of the end for the first phase of my history. By that time, the bark peelers, working 11-hour days for about $1.50 a day, had cleared the forest. The river was dredged up to 12 feet for 20 miles, enabling the loggers to float lumber down the river to the sawmills in South Haven. Then lumber was shipped to Chicago and Milwaukee by schooners, many that were built right here on the banks of the Black River. With the land cleared and the lumber gone, fruit trees were planted, and peaches and apples were the area's first foray into agribusiness. In 1896, some 2 million baskets of peaches were shipped by steamer to Chicago. But by 1900, the railroad was established, and boat building here and shipping produce by boat faded. Also by this time, the city, after paying $600 for the land at the end of Michigan Avenue, had erected a fine keeper's house, some 1,200 feet from the foot of the pier. The keeper who occupied that house the longest was Captain James Donahue. He was awarded the job of lighthouse keeper for his service in the Civil War, where he lost a leg in the Battle of the Wilderness. That's right, the keeper who kept me the longest had only one leg and had to come out, climb that catwalk in all sorts of weather twice a day, once to light my light and then again to snuff it out.
Oh, Captain Donahue, the keeper of the light. Oh, how you kept it burning in the darkest waters deep of the night. But 35 years of faithful care, you brought us to safe harbor. Oh, Captain Donahue, will you rest in peace tonight?
Quite a guy, that Donahue. He was the town mayor, ran the waterworks, and even had a boat livery service on the river. In all, there were 6 keepers who watched over me until around 1940, and by that time, everything was automated. It was during Donahue's watch that they put up the new me in 1903. I came to town unassembled on the steamer Hyacinth. I was all steel and painted white. The black cast iron walkway around the lens room had already been used for 40 years on the light at Muskegon. It was originally forged in France, as there was no facility in the U.S. that could make a single piece that large at the time. And the light itself was moved from the old wooden me to the new me. 10 years later, the pier, though still wood, was lengthened. I was still white and still had my bullseye windows. And oh yeah, my foghorn was a manual model operated solely by Donahue's lung power. Now, the next year, that was replaced by a 1,600-pound bell, and by 1937, the bell was replaced by a new droning foghorn. You older folks may remember my call at the time. Each port had its own foghorn code. Mine was 2 seconds, then 3 seconds of silence, then 2 seconds again, then 23 seconds, and finally 2 seconds again. It sounded like this. Beep. Beep. Well, you get the idea. By the 1920s, a range light was added at the foot of the pier to aid in navigation, and an all-steel used catwalk from Calumet City was erected. In 1940, the wooden pier was replaced with concrete and lengthened for the last time, one would think, to its current length of 1,250 feet. That was the year after the Coast Guard took responsibility for me, when the U.S. Life-Saving Service was phased out. Everything went along pretty smoothly until 1973, when the station closed, and later was gutted by fire. I should have been a little more suspicious when the Corps of Engineers proposed to tear down the catwalk in 1985. As I was no longer manned and the catwalk wasn't necessary. Not necessary. Thank goodness a group of South Haven catwalk fans didn't feel that way. They formed a volunteer catwalk committee, and the catwalk was not only saved, but with added lights, it looked better than it ever had. So that's me in all my glory. 37 feet tall, 12 feet in diameter at the base, 10 feet at the parapet. I am the light. What do you mean you want to see my insides? Really? Do you have to? Look, at the time, first you got to find that special key. Oh, you found it. Well, that found, my watertight door has to be opened, and I guess you are welcomed in. Like I know, it's not too glamorous. The first ladder takes you up to the catwalk level. Make sure you brush away that first layer of spider webs and their occupants. Who would think that there would be spiders way out here at the end of the pier? But I can tell you, I've shared living space with them for years. Okay, once you catch my catwalk level, you'll notice a track where the fog bell was mounted, and also just where my bullseye windows were boarded up. But you've got one more level to go, one more level of spider webs to break through until you reach the lens room. And once you get there, you start to get the idea. You get a whole new perspective on life, a whole new point of view. It's here where you start dreaming. Oh, if you could see, if you could only see what I've seen. Look out my window. See what was happening at the time the new me was on duty. I'm going to help you see what I saw. What's that approaching in the harbor? Just one of the 8 different passenger steamers that were then plying the Chicago-South Haven route. Steamship travel was well underway, but crowds still gathered to see the big boats come and go. If memory serves, that's the Petoskey coming in 1901. It was still wood. And here comes the Iroquois at 235 feet with its 49 staterooms and 2 bridal parlors. And look, it's the Darius Cole, a side-wheeler made for the Dunkley steamship line, guaranteed to reach 20 knots. Never made it past 15 and was returned to the builders 3 years after it was launched, the purchase price refunded. And let's not forget the big guys that first graced the harbor the same year the new me arrived in 1903. The city of South Haven, built in Toledo for the Dunkley Williams Company and known as the White Flyer. It could carry 2,000 passengers. 6 weeks later, the 269-foot Eastland arrived on the scene. Built in Port Huron for the Michigan Steamship Company, the boat carried 2,000 passengers. And a couple years later, the Dunkley Williams and Michigan Steamship Companies would merge to form the South Haven line. Many times the boats would be overloaded, and oddly, many times they arrived together, dumping off 5,000 passengers at the South Haven docks all at once. Remember, at that time there was no air conditioning, highway travel wasn't as convenient, and passenger rail lines didn't serve many of the shoreline communities. People would board boats at the Rush Street docks in Chicago, have a pleasant ride some 60 miles across the lake, land in South Haven, spend an hour or two at the beach, and many times return to Chicago in the evening of the same day. The price for all this? $1 round trip. Speed was of the essence. Races between the two were common. Many times I saw boats entering the harbor with the leading boat playing The Girl I Left Behind on its steam calliope. A sad aside that happened long after she served the South Haven route, in 1915 the Eastland was chartered by the Western Electric Company for a day trip from Chicago to Michigan City. The boat capsized at the Rush Street dock and over 850 people perished. By far the worst maritime accident in Great Lakes history. A seldom mentioned fact was that the boat was righted and remodeled and used by the U.S. Navy as a training ship called the Wilmette. Regular passenger steam travel came to an end in South Haven with the last boat, the 289-foot Roosevelt, discontinuing service here in 1941. But that wasn't even my biggest challenge. Oh, if you could only see what I saw. By the 1920s, freighter traffic was outpacing passenger ships. The South Haven freight terminals played host to ships from Norway, Sweden, Germany, France, Israel, Greece, and England. The first came in 1925, and by 1937, South Haven claimed to be the busiest foreign port on the Great Lakes. And what those ships brought. Wood pulp for the paper mills in Kalamazoo. Ton after ton of coal for area homes and factories, gravel for the ready-mix plant that was located where the Michigan Maritime Museum now stands, pig iron for the foundry. But by the 70s, there was no more heavy industry in South Haven, and whatever was needed by inland cities was provided by rail and trucks. You think it was curtains for me? Not by a long shot, if you could only see what I saw. Like the fishing industry. Early days when 6-foot sturgeon were caught, scraped of their eggs for the caviar for the fancy restaurants in Chicago, and then dumped on the beach for farmers to lug off to fertilize their fields. And what about pier fishing? I don't see so much of that today, what with the thinning yellow perch schools, but it was a long-time favorite activity out on my piers. No more. No Jack's Place, the nickel hamburger and bait facility, at St. Joe Street and the river on the south side. No more Finch's Bait Shop on the north side. Oh yeah, the North Pier was a good spot when the wind was blowing right. But mostly the important commercial activity was covered by several sturdy tugs that fished the water with determination and diligence. The LCJ, still around today, but it's used for passenger trips on the lake. And the Richter's Butch LaFawn. And Ray Wakild's boat, the Helen W., part of the fleet in the 50s. They'd go out in any weather, I remember when the Butch, LCJ, and Buick got caught up in the ice and the Coast Guard couldn't reach them. The fishermen had no choice but to stay with their tugs, which ended up the next morning off the coast of Glen, when a shift in the ice made traveling back to South Haven possible. Not always so lucky, the Indian and Richard H. went out on Armistice Day in 1940, and despite a valiant effort by the Coast Guard, storms took both boats and left a total of 8 men dead. But with the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway and ocean-going predators coming into the lake in the builds of tramp steamers, the lamprey eel left the trout and whitefish population reduced by some 90%. The commercial fishing industry, as South Haven knew it, came to an end by the early 70s. There were exceptions, like the charter industry going after salmon, that were added to the lake to help control alewives. That worked out for just about everyone concerned. And of course, the iconic Captain Nichols perch boats gave it a good 35-year run. But they're gone now too. Not to worry, because there's one thing left that you can still see like I see. The one industry, one endeavor that's been here right from the start and is going stronger than ever yet today. And that's fun. Recreational boating has been here right from the beginning, be it pleasure paddling romantics to power paddling fanatics during the local Harbor Fest. I've seen them all.
The Black River pathway runs from Bangor to the shore. It's there for us to paddle as it flows on evermore.
Launches launched from an amusement park that stood where the Maritime Museum that launches now stands. Trips up the river to Mooney and Riverside Parks to see the one-legged daredevil bike rider. Are now trips up the river to cross under I-196 and follow it to where it splits north and south. The South Haven Yacht Club, once the only spot west of the bridge for pleasure boats, and at one time the international headquarters for Lightning-class sailboats. The fleet was completely gone from the harbor for years, but is being revived as we speak. And talk about sailboats, how about the Friends Goodwill? It represents a boat even older than me. And since 2004, I've been guiding this one, filled with folks from near and far, in and out of the harbor, 3, sometimes 4 times a day. And now with over 2,000 pleasure boats up and down the river, there is more to see and do than ever before, and there is no place in the world that I would rather be than right out on the end of the South Pier. Over the years, I've been here through thick and thin, good times and bad times, stormy days and sunny days, calm seas and palmy nights. I have guided ships of all shapes and sizes, and sailors of all ages in and out of the harbor. But I've truly gone beyond that to become part of the community. You see me when you come to town by sea, when you walk to town from your boat at the transient marina, when you come by car off the interstate, when you enter the downtown shopping district. You've seen my image on businesses. My name has graced hotels. Models of me can be spotted all over town. You'll see me on the masthead of the local paper. I've been a sign of business. I've been a building. I've sold real estate. I've been a beacon for dentists and oculists. I've been the subject of countless paintings and photographs. I've been a giant neighborhood lawn ornament, a beach sticker for your car so you can come park and see me, and even a manhole cover. Not to mention your friend in the end. I am your shining light. I am your red rock of Gibraltar. I am your touchstone to history. I am a symbol of your past. And thanks to all of you and the Historical Association of South Haven, I will be a proud symbol of your future.
There's a lighthouse standing on the end of the pier, like a mother watching o'er her child. On days when the lake as smooth as glass, or the combers rolling wild, she watches in the day and she shines in the night. The vessels come and go. She sends out her call in the heavy fog to guide the sailor home. She's been there in the sun, there in the rain, there in the ice and snow, watching the sailors passing by and watching the children grow. She watched as I learned to swim on the beach when I was 8 years old. It was early in the summer as I held my breath and the water was so cold. She watches her children laugh and play, building castles in the sand. She watched as I dove, I swam off second, and she watched me grow to be a man.
Sing with us.
Everybody. She's been there in the sun, there in the rain, there in the ice and snow, watching the sailors passing by and watching the children grow. She's been there in the sun, there in the rain, there in the ice and snow, watching the sailors passing by and watching the children grow. Well, I'd miss that lighthouse standing on the pier if they ever took her down. It would never be the same if they took her away from the shores of my hometown. She's been there in the sun, there in the rain, there in the ice and snow, watching the sailors passing by and watching the children grow. She's been there in the sun, there in the rain, there in the ice and snow, watching the sailors passing by and watching the children grow.
Send a gleam across the way. Some poor fainting, struggling seamen, you may rescue, you may save.
Hey, two down, hundreds to go. Hundreds to go for that, man.
Dark the night of sin has settled, loud the angry billows roar. Eager eyes are watching, longing for the lights along the shore. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the way. Some poor fading, struggling seamen, you may rescue, you may save. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the way. Some poor fainting, struggling sea